All right, hi zoology. So here's what we are going to be doing today. We are going to be talking about cladograms. We're going to take some notes. So please write this information down. The purpose of this, honestly, is to help you with your homework assignment. So that's really the purpose of this. So please watch this first, then do your homework assignment. So the essential question that I'd like you to write down, and again, please pause when you need to. But the essential question is, how are animals placed in a cladogram? So pause that if you didn't get that down quite yet, and then we're going to move on. Okay, so get that essential question down. All right, I'm going to introduce some vocabulary terms to you. So the very first vocabulary term that I need to introduce to you is called a homologous structure. Definitely get this definition down. So you might want to pause it here in just a second to make sure you get it. But they are structures in the different species that are similar because of common ancestry. So pause me right now because I'm going to move on if you'd like to write that down. All right, so pause it. When you get done with the pause, let me kind of explain to you then what's happening. Whenever I think of a homologous structure, here's some other things you might want to write down. Homologous structures are related structures, which means the structures are the same, and this shows common ancestry. The functions are different. The functions are different. So check this out. So let's write down. Homologous structures have a related structure, different function. I would definitely get that down in our notes. Check it out again. Here is our arm. Here is our arm. And our arm has the exact same bones as everybody else in this picture. They're all the same. There's the humerus, the ulna, the radius. But they're doing different things. The function is different. So humans and shrews are using their arms for grasping things, okay? Whereas a dog is using its forelimb for walking, very different function. And dolphins and seals, they literally do have the exact same bones in their fins, in their forearms, but they're using it for swimming. So what this does is it shows us that these animals have a common ancestor. Really important when we're setting up cladograms. All right, moving on to analogous structures. Again, pause, write down the definition, and then I'm going to go into an explanation. So you might want to pause and write it down. Analogous structures then are similarity instructions due to adaptations from evolutionary pressures, which is kind of like convergent evolution. This does not show a common ancestor. One thing you might want to write down about this would be analogous structures. All of these animals have the same function. So the function is related. They all can fly. But structurally speaking, if you look inside their wings are not structurally the same. So this does not show relationship. Basically, my favorite one is looking at an insect's wings. They have 0 bones, but they can fly. Compare that to a bird's wings, which has kind of like the same bones that we have in our arm. They can fly, but just because they're doing the same thing, a while ago people thought, oh, they're like the same, they're related. No, they are not. That's an analogous structure. They can both fly, function is the same, but their structure is different, and that means they would have completely different DNA. Okay. What goes along with analogous structures is something called convergent evolution. So you could maybe take notes under analogous structures. I would put convergent evolution. Again, what this is doing is just a definition. You already wrote it down once, but this occurs when similar environmental pressures and natural selection happens. And so the animal might look the same, but it's not the same. And I don't know if you guys know anything about moles. These two moles are living in the same environment. They're living underground, and they might look kind of the same, but FYI, the Australian mole is a mammal, but it's a marsupial mammal, which is very different than the North American mole, which is a placental mammal. Those are two different, very, 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 very different, very different, okay? I think another example is like these two individuals where one is actually a crustacean, a pill bug is actually related to like crabs, and a millipede would be more related to insects, even though they look very similar. They do similar things, but they are not related to each other. Okay? All right. And so just to kind of like, here's a really good example of convergent evolution. Are you ready? You might want to write this one down. A really good example of convergent evolution, which would show analogous structures, would be a shark and a dolphin. A lot of times when they're in the ocean, they look very similar to each other. They both even have that dorsal fin that we have come to fear if you think it's a shark. But a shark is a fish and actually has no bones in its body because it's cartilaginous. We'll talk about that. And a dolphin is a mammal, and it has all of the bones that you have in your body, and they have lungs. Dolphins have lungs. They have to come up for air. Sharks are fish. They breathe through their gills. So again, great example. When something looks the same, does not mean that they're same. It's just environmental pressures have made, it feels good to like dolphins and sharks look the same because they live in the ocean. So they need to be nice and sleek and streamlined to swim, but they're really different animals completely. Okay. All right, so then this is just a nice little definition of a cladogram if you want to get that down. Again, we did talk about them last class period, but it's just a depiction of patterns and shared characteristics among taxa. It's just a graphic organizer used to show shared characteristics. That's really all I need you to write down here. So if you want to pause it and just get that definition, you can. Just anything in red. Everything else, if you just want to read through and pause and read through it, you can, but I'm not going to hold you responsible for it. Okay, moving on, unless you want to pause. And these are two words that we did define in class, so we just maybe want to go over them one more time. The difference between a symplesiomorphic characteristic and a synapomorphic characteristic. Again, symplesiomorphic, another name for them is a shared primitive characteristic, and it's what everybody on the cladogram shares. Everybody shares it. It's at the beginning. A synapomorphic characteristic is a shared derived characteristic, and it is shared with some members of the cladogram, but not all. So some, but not all. Again, refer back to the activity that we did in class, but make sure you know symplesiomorphic, everybody has that shared characteristic. Some synapomorphic, just some share. And I'm going to give you some examples of this in just a moment. If you want to pause and get these definitions down, you can, but we should already have gotten that from the other day. Okay? And then an outgroup. An outgroup, you're going to see this in your homework assignment, but I'm going to show you an example, a really good example here in just a second. What it does, it helps to differentiate shared and shared derived and shared primitive characteristics. It's on the outer edge of the cladogram. I'll show you some examples of that. Okay. All right, we can kind of skip that. All right, so here's what I would do. If you want to be successful today on your homework assignment that is due at midnight tonight, which is your cladogram homework assignment that you're going to turn in via Canvas, I would probably pause right now and get this in your notes. Plus, this is a really good cladogram. I know you already have some, but this is a good one, and I'm going to ask lots of questions about it. And look what it has. It has an outgroup. So, again, can you see this animal? I know it's hard to read. It's called a lancelet. A lancelet is a chordate. It's in our same phylum, and it shares the same phylum with these animals, but it's kind of very different than the rest. So it's like on the outer edge. Whereas you can see, again, whenever we draw out a cladogram, these are the characteristics, and then these are the animals. Okay, so this would be a really good one to get down in your notes. I would highly, highly recommend that you do this. If you do that, it's going to help you out with your homework assignment. All right, so pause it if you need it. All right, so this is the same one, and now I'm going to ask you some questions. So this is what you're probably going to see here in just a bit on your homework assignment. So if I ask this question, what is the symplesiomorphic characteristic or shared primitive characteristic for this cladogram? So take a second. What would you say? Looking at its characteristics, look at the characteristics. Which one that is it that everybody, except for the out group, would share? Right? All righty, I'm going to give you the answer. If you said vertebrate, you are correct. So if you said the vertebrae, you are correct. All right? Again, can you see how everyone is a vertebrate? They all have vertebrae except for that out group. So that is the shared primitive characteristic. All right, if I ask this question, what is the synapomorphic or shared derived characteristic for amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals? So what is it that they share, that not everybody shares, but just they share? That's a synapomorphic characteristic. I'll give you a second. All right, if you said 4 limbs, you are correct. If you said 4 limbs, you are correct. And here's another one. Let's get even more specific. What is a synapomorphic characteristic for reptiles, birds, and mammals? All right, if you said amniotic egg, you are correct. You are correct. All right. All right, this should then help you. This is to help you with your homework assignment. So the other 2 things you need to do today, now that you've taken these notes, again, this is to help you, you should do the cladogram homework that is linked to Canvas and turn that in by midnight tonight. And also, I really need you to go and do the animal developmental podcast, which you're going to click on that link. It's going to take you to a video, but I want you to write it down in your packet on page 22 and 23. I am totally going to grade that the next time I see you. So if you're an A-day student, it's due tomorrow. If you're a B-day student, it would be due, the animal developmental podcast would be due on the next day. All right? Okay, check it out in Canvas. Please get this stuff done. I know I'm asking a lot of you today, but you should be good to go. And then make sure you're studying for your vocabulary quiz, which we'll take together the next time I see you. All right. Thanks for doing this. Good luck. Questions, let me know.